Milton Greenfield, Jr., who served in the U.S. Navy November 1956 through August 1976. This is August 26, 2003 at the Stratton VA Medical Center in Albany, New York. The interviewers are Kenneth and June Hunter. What is your full name and when and where were you born?
My full name is Milton Lewis Greenfield, Jr. I was born in Albany, New York, in 1938.
And what was your pre-war education and occupation?
I went to the Albany public school system. I graduated in '56 from Phillips Schuyler Senior High School.
And what caused you to enter the Navy?
Family. All my family comes from the Navy. The only ones that are out other than the Navy were married into the family. And I had three brothers and a sister, and all three brothers were in different services. My youngest one was in the Navy too. In fact, he was in Charleston when I was in Vietnam, and he wanted to transfer, but the government said the senior, and I was senior at the time, could stop the transfer. So I figured my mother had enough to worry with me being over there. She, as the oldest, she didn't need to baby the family over there too. He was very upset about that, but such is life.
Yeah.
Now, was there a lot of rivalry between the brothers and all when ribbing each other?
Oh no, well, only me, because being the oldest and being what they call a gator sailor in the amphibs, I used to transport a lot of Marines and soldiers. So the one kid that was Hermie was in the Army, and I used to bust on him a lot. And the next one was in the Air Force, and he was down in Texas, so I didn't get to see him too much. And the baby, Ronnie, he was in Charleston. It was ironic because when I joined the Navy, I was in Mine Pack, and he was in Mine Land. And that's why he was trying to transfer from one coast to the other.
For those benefit of the people who don't know these military acronyms, what was Mine Land and Mine Pack?
Mine Land was the Atlantic side, minesweepers and mine warfare. And Mine Pack was the Pacific side, which is where I was at. And Mine Land was out of Charleston. Mine Pack was out of Long Beach, California.
Now, what was basic training like when you went in the Navy?
Cold. It was in November 1956. My company was the first 191. Mr. Lovelady, who was our company commander, used to take joy in getting us up at daybreak and marching us through the fresh falling snow. Being from New York, I was used to snow, so it didn't bother me. The only thing that bothered me was when they cut all my hair off, and the only thing I had military was a knit cap. And naturally my clothes didn't fit at first, but we filled that out.
I take it this was up at Great Lakes?
No, Bainbridge, Maryland.
Oh. And it was that cold there then?
It was cold. I was at Chicago, or Great Lakes, for after boot camp, and I went to Class A school. But I was told when I joined I was going to be a machinist, and I wound up in electrician school. Needs of the service. Needless to say, I didn't pass I passed the physical, but fooling around, I got flunked out of it, and I wound up back to sea. Well, I mean, I wasn't in no trouble. It was just that I wasn't interested in being an electrician. Later on in life, I became an electrician.
Oh, that's interesting.
Primarily from the Navy's introduction.
Uh-huh. Now, when you were through with basic training, where was your first assignment?
First assignment was Great Lakes Class A school. And when I joined, I was what they call a high school seaman recruit. And after I took the battery of tests, I became an engineering rate. So I was a fireman going to electrician school, and after I blew that, then I went to sea, and I became an engineman. And I followed through that the rest of my life.
What ship were you assigned to?
The first ship was USS Loyalty, MSO 457. Wooden ships, iron men. When the fleet goes, I was already bent. And the theme was if we ever get hit by a mine, we'd be pulling toothpicks for the rest of our life. But the ship was made out of wood. It was oak and cherry and ash. But we didn't have the old Holy Stone about it. It was after they had them on battleships and cruisers.
the holystones for the uninitiated, where
Holy
the cleaning.
Stone, they had wooden decks on the battleships and the cruisers, and they used to have a stick that was a square stone, and they used to move it back and forth and keep the burrs off the wood and keep the wood smooth.
And spotless.
And spotless. And if you didn't do it right, most made it. I only seen pictures of it. I never did it actually. It wasn't a course they taught in boot camp.
Now, what was a day on that ship like, an ordinary day?
On the Minesweep, an ordinary day was, well, first thing you got to remember, it was only 100 and some feet long, and 40, 50 feet wide. And if a Liberty boat went by, or what we used to say, if a rowboat went by, we were underway. And but it was small, 38 men to a ship, including officers. And we usually had a lieutenant commander or a senior lieutenant as a CO. And I naturally went right into. In fact, when I went aboard the ship, the Chief Boyle, 40 years I remember his name. He was on the quarterdeck, and he asked me what was I striking for. And I said, machine repairman. He said, you're an engineman now. And he showed me where the hole was. But it was nice. I mean, food was good. We were compact. You knew everybody, naturally. You're only 38 men. And there were Fairbanks on some ships. The one I had were Packards. The only Packard I knew was a car. But I became an expert as a Packard ID 500, 1500. Which was a 12-cylinder diesel and variable pitch for a screw propeller. And as the captain wanted more speed, the speed of the engine stayed the same. The pitch turned similar to an aircraft. When the propeller's pitch is turned, the blades bite into more air. And a ship, it bites into more water. Top speed was 18 knots with a good wind behind you.
So I'm sure then it wasn't like a luxury cruise ship. You must have had.
No, you were like 40 feet was the farthest you were ever away from your engine room. So if when GQ went, or if you had to get someplace in a hurry, you could stand at one end of the ship and yell at the guy on the other end. It wasn't. We didn't have modern conveniences as air conditioning and stuff like that. Later on, they put them on, but when I went in, there was vents and fans, and that was it.
Did you ever feel claustrophobic? And
only later on in life. When I went on another class of ship, we had to go in and clean tanks, and I think that's what brought the claustrophobia. But on the ship itself, no.
What was the food like on a ship? The sleeping quarters like?
Well,
describe general quarters
canvas
drills.
racks. That was right after hammocks went out, and you had to string your own wrap, and you had a horsehair mattress that got hard after the first 15 minutes on it. The food was great. We had a lot of World War II food with emergency rations and such, but the first week out you ran out of fresh milk, and the second week out you started having powdered eggs, but you had plenty of canned vegetables and fresh meat because we had a good refrigeration unit. Fruits and vegetables, we had a good cuisine. We had first class and chiefs for cooks, and third class were just starting out, so they learned from experts.
And how long would a tour usually be before you got to land again?
Well, you get underway almost as bad as destroyers. The old saying is you get underway Monday and you come back in Friday night. Being a small ship, we had a special sonar. A lot of times when we were deployed, we would be called to go search for downed aircraft or stuff like that, because the sonar would give you a picture of the bottom of the ocean. I was an engineer, so I only know that in passing. But we had all rates on. We had quartermasters, we had for navigation, sonarmen for the mine sweeps, and postmates, enginemen, electrician, machinists. Not too many machinists in respect to above a third class. We'd have a seaman or fireman right out of A school, because we had a small boiler. But the engineman took care of most everything else on the ship, mechanically.
Now, people think when they see today's ships that it's luxurious. You have plenty of water and all the cleaning equipment, your clothing washed and so forth. It's not the case.
No,
Your experiences.
In my rating, machinists and enginemen, we used to make the water to use on the ship. When we left port, we'd have full tanks, but after you're out for a week or 10 days, you had to being a diesel-powered ship, it wasn't too bad. But there was times when we were rationed where we get 2 cups of water, and you could do your teeth, shave, or take a small shower. You'd be surprised what you can do with a 10-ounce cup of water. And don't get caught in the shower, or if you were in the shower, they have what they call a sea shower, where you were in 5 minutes. You got in, rinsed, soaked down, and rinsed off. Sometimes you'd rinse off with, or soak down with salt water, and then you'd final rinse, you'd get fresh water. But always the engines came first and the boilers came first. And then, but we had always averaged out about a gallon of water a day per man. The evaporators were what they call X12 we call them, but it was an X2. They'd make 12 to 24,000 gallons a day, if they were working right. And then that was a mess when you had to take them apart to clean all the brine out, which is salt water that's been used over, made into fresh water.
Did they have roving patrols when fellows were taking showers to make sure there was no wastage of water?
Well, they weren't. It was one shipmate would look out for another shipmate. If somebody thought you were in the shower too long, they'd physically reach in and turn the water off on you. And if the engineers were watching the level of water and if it got to a certain point, it wasn't uncommon for you to have to go up on the main deck and get washed down with a salt water hose. So it paid you to pay attention. And like I said, the primary is the engines and the boilers, because that's how you propel the ship.
What was the general quarters situation like on the ship, and what was your station?
My station was various. It went from being a telephone talker in the engine room to a lee helm in the bridge, pilot house. And that was the control. The captain would call down and say what speed he wanted, and using the engine order telegraph, you would tell the engine room what kind of speed to make. Like I said, on the first 2 ships I was on, the variable pitch was controlled right from the pilot house, but it could be controlled remotely by the engineman in the engine room. It was just you punch in numbers, or you'd hold a button in until a certain RPM came up. The ship stayed at 250 RPM, and then the pitch would change, and then you'd watch your speed. And it was just like a speedboat. You knew how fast you were going through the water. It would vary. If you had a good wind behind you, you use less fuel. But there was times going to Japan that we'd get to, maybe a day out, and we'd have to physically go into the fuel tanks and scoop out the diesel because we were running low. And I've seen times when the only fuel we had, we'd pull in the Yokosuka or Sasebo, and we'd have what was in the day tanks, which was ready fuel for the engines. So later on, they decided to put what they call a blob on the aft deck, and they fill that up with thousands of gallons. I don't know what, I think it was 10,000 gallons of fuel, and that would take us from the States to Japan. We'd stop at Pearl Harbor for fuel, and we'd stop at Johnson Island for fuel, and we'd stop at Midway for fuel. And the difference was in Hawaii, you didn't have to worry about, well, you'd never dump fuel over the side, but if you weren't paying attention while you were fueling, you'd pollute the harbor. And it'd be a court-martial if you get to Midway and pollute their harbor, because that their stills made the water, seawater into fresh water for the island. So we were very careful. I only seen one time in 10 trips where somebody, not my ship, I never lost a ship, and I never lost an engine, but we were careful.
Can you describe what the minesweeping operation was like?
Well, first thing is you learned not to step over a moving line, because you had line and cable, and the certain parts of, depending on the sweep operation, if you were using buoys, they had what they call pigs, and they'd run out on a wire, and there'd be cutters along the wire, and if they hit a mine, it would be a wire or a chain, and the cutter would have a 45 caliber shell in it, not a slug, just a shell, and that would shoot a chisel out and cut the mine cable. It would surface, and then we'd shoot it with either a 40 millimeter or small arms. And magnetic minefield was, and there's various types of mines. Magnetic minefield, we have what we call a magtail, which was about three 6-inch cables wrapped around each other, and it'd send a pulse, and it'd be port and starboard, and you had what they call a master and a slave. One side would be master, one side would be slave. The mine would be set off by an electrical impulse, and the electrician could vary the amperage that's going through the wire. It wouldn't electrocute you if you were laying in the water, so there was no danger of it transmitting back to the ship. If you got to straddle it, you might get a little shock, and that would set the mine off, and it literally would explode. And believe me, it's an experience when a mine goes off and you're about 20 feet from it. The whole ship is literally lifted out of the water, even though it's, like I said, 150-some feet long and 50-some feet wide. And there's a pressure mine where they have an apparatus to hang over the side of the ship, and it's a big drum, and it sends out a pressure impulse, and that sets another mine off. Then there's another mine that they call it a counter. 3 ships pass, the 3rd ship gets blown up, depending on the weight of the ship. Because when a ship goes through water, it transmits a pressure on the mine. And like I said, there were times, so much pressure. A battleship would be so much pressure, and that would be what the enemy would be looking for. Capital ship. I was in the mine pack for 12 years, so I'm pretty well knowledgeable about the equipment. And then they had the other ones where there was 2 or 3 types of variations on the hammer. One would be a round one, and what we call the deadhead, which is just a flat. The drum would be on the front, and I forget what the side one. There was another one that was oval type, and it had the drums on the side. So it would send out both ways. You'd have both of them over the side, one port, one starboard, and it would protect the ship. We were usually light, and we were wood, so we were non-magnetic. Then you had the magnetic mine, where a metal ship would go over it, and the mine would sit on the bottom of the water. Moored mines were ones that hung up that you see in the movies, with the spikes on them. But the other ones would set in a little box on the bottom of the ocean floor, and depending on what set them off, whether it was pressure, electric, or magnetic, not magnetic, the magnetic signature of the ship, and it would release the mine. It's when you see the movies where the ship literally gets blown out of the water, that mine came up underneath the ship and exploded. Not on contact, sometimes on contact, sometimes just the pressure of the ship would set the mine off.
What was the next type of ship that you went to?
Well, the next type of ship was a 6-month tour on a cargo ship, and we didn't leave country. I transferred off of it when it was heading for Nam the first time. That was a steam-driven ship, and we carried cargo. We called them. It was an AKA, auxiliary cargo. Now I forget what they call them. They changed all the names of the ship, the designations. But we carried cargo, and we launched boats and operated off the Coronado Island or Coronado Silver Strand in San Diego. That's where the proverbial landing on the beach and the ramp drops, and all the ground pounders or Marines, jarheads, whatever you want to call them, run ashore. The story is we take these guys to a nice, beautiful beach, and they'd start a battle. Unfortunately, a lot of guys got killed. But on drills, you train them so that they didn't get killed. And I pride myself in the cargo ship and Assault Craft Unit 1, which was another unit I was with, never dropped a soldier or a Marine in the water.
What was the name of the ship, and how big a complement did it have?
Mathews, AKA 96, and it had 100 and, don't hold me to the number, I think it was 175. This is peacetime. 175 to 210 men. It was steam driven. And my job on that ship, besides small craft, was making water. And always made black water for the BTs, which is pure water for the boilers.
And then after, you said you were on there about a year?
About 6 months on the Mathews.
6 months.
Yeah. All the other tours, it was 18 to 24 months, depending on the type of the ship.
Okay.
Do you recall anything unusual from that cruise?
On that particular cruise, only yeah, but I can't tell you, it's confidential. The captain went over the hill. He was a drinker, and I didn't tell you his name.
No.
That's all right.
Anyway, I was his driver because I was the only one he trusted driving the car, the station wagon, and we were in San Diego, and I took him to the old club, and I was being the driver or the captain, the gig engineer. I had open gangway, so when the captain went ashore, I went ashore. Anyway, he decided when he came out he wanted to take the van, or the station wagon, and they found it on the Tijuana border. Anyway, he got reprimanded, but he didn't get broke, but he got reprimanded. And like I said, I was only on there 6 months, so it was nothing spectacular, except for loading and unloading cargo in the Marines on the Silver Strand. That's where I discovered that I had a fear of heights. When you had to go over the side and go down 30, 40 feet to a small bouncing boat, I decided I was going to change my rate to something else. I didn't, but I was taken off the craft because it was get halfway up the ship and freeze. They couldn't have that, and there's a danger I could have fell too. So the captain liked me, so he made me that's how I became driver. So he boat engineer, but that wasn't no big deal either because you had to go out on what they call the spar, and it was a little pole they hung out the side of the ship, and you had to go out that and then drop down and come down a Jacob's ladder, which is a ladder made out of old boom handles, and a bosun mate doing some weaving, and you were here again 30, 40 feet in the air. So I didn't go in the gig too many times, unless you came alongside. I was sorry, I was chicken.
Did you have any shore-based?
Yes, I was. It was supposed to be shore duty. I was in New London, Connecticut, and the tugboat, YTN 364, and she was underway more than I was ever on the ship. Every time the sub wanted to get underway, I had to get underway with the tug. I was the exec on that. We had a bosun mate chief, and I was second class. I later made first class engineman, so I was the second senior. So we run up and down the Thames River. And in the wintertime, it was hairy because we had to break the ice between the submarines. The submariners were a little skittish about having ice form around their hull, although it never made any sense to me because they went down so many hundreds of feet under the water and it didn't bother their hull. But anyway, 2 o'clock in the morning, it wasn't uncommon to get called on the radio or the phone and say, hey, get the tug underway and go up between the piers. Harry, the Thames River, contrary to popular belief, saltwater does freeze. And so when we were on the river would start freezing up, and we'd have to run up and down and do Coast Guard ice breaking. And we had one tug went literally off the ice, off the water into the ice, laid over on its side, and then caved in the ice. But after that, they never did that again. They said no more. If it couldn't break the ice bowing into it, we'd leave it alone. Call the Coast Guard and have them send a cutter up.
Now, did the Coast Guard, did you get any ribbing from them if you called on them for help?
No, because we were right there in New London, Connecticut, and the Coast Guard Academy was across the river. They called it New London Sub Base, but New London was on one side, Norwich was on the other. And the sub base was on the Norwich side. But no, the Coast Guard, we worked pretty close together. We had a couple torpedo retrievers, so they'd find a torpedo a dummy torpedo floating out in the Sound, and we'd have to go get it. Normally the ship would get underway to sub. They would fire so many torpedoes, and the retriever or the tugboat would pick them up and bring them back to the AUW, and they'd rework them. But occasionally one would get away and we couldn't catch it, the coasties would find it. Shallow water sailors, they did their job. We did ours too. We're the white water sailor, they were green water.
Imagine conditions must have been, I'd say, much better than being on a large ship when you're on the tug.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, it was supposedly shore duty. They called it preferred shore duty, but we were underway more than we were tied up. We ate good. We had a choice between comrades or subsistence, and the married guys all voted for subsistence because they got to take their money home, and the guys that were on the boat, we got fed, but we didn't get no extra money in our pay. So one worked the other. When they ate aboard ship or aboard the tug, they had to pay so much, much more reasonable than eating in a restaurant.
Now, to go back a little bit to give our viewers an idea on the pay scales, can you remember what it was, how much you received when you were back in basic training and then up to this point?
$38 every 2 weeks when I joined the Navy, and the incentive was to make rate. You made more money, and also go to sea, and you had sea pay, and if you went into hazardous duty, you got hazardous duty pay. When we were in Vietnam, we got $110 extra a month, plus tax-free. That's how I bought my first house, because every time somebody wanted to transfer back to the States, I'd volunteer to take their duty, and I'd ship in. And I was in and out of Nam about 9 times. Sometimes I'd be in there for 6 months, sometimes I'd be in there for a week. The officers used to fly over Vietnam just to get the combat pay, which was all right. They also got their flight time too, and some of them didn't come back. When they were in, they had to go in on a combat mission. But I never knew any of them personally. But when first LCU I was assigned to was 1500 or the 500, and we were in North Island, and I was sitting on my sea bag at the end of the airstrip. And this commander came out and he said, "Who's going to the LCU 500? I said, "Me." He said, "Going back to the barracks, it just got blowed up." So I was that far from being on that ship. And I was in and out of the country. Sometimes we never got fired on, because it seemed like every time I showed up, the war would be either null or a low, rather. Like I say, except for the Coconino County, she was upstream, and we were beached unloading cargo. And VC used to take water buffaloes, fill them full of C4 or explosives, and they'd float them down the river, and we were always downstream. And all this coconuts and dead bodies of animals would float up against, we didn't know it at the time, but they'd lay up against the ship, and they were electronically set off. I didn't see the size of the hole, but they told me you could drive a semi-truck through it. And I was in the engine room on the next ship, and it was a little hairy. All I heard was a bang. And I come up out of the hole, and somebody said the Coconino County just took one. So after that, they used to put nets out alongside the ship. So if anything came downriver, it would deflect away from us. And then, of course, you always had the chance of rockets coming at you. But like I said, well, I was lucky. I never seen that much combat, even though we were in the combat zone.
For those who don't know, could you tell us what LCU stands for?
Oh, I'm sorry. Landing Craft Utility. The one I was on, the 1610 class, if you remember in the war pictures, they showed a road going from the ship, floating road, going from the ship to the shore. When the World War II, the LCU would hit the beach, open up the ramp, and the troops or the tanks would, or trucks or whatever they were carrying, would leave the boat. And the back end of it was closed off, and that was where the engine room was. On the class I was on, instead of having these causeways, which they would lay them on the beach if the water was too shallow for an LST or an LPD, which is, LST is landing ship tank, LPD is a big dock. It literally sinks down into the water, and small craft, or LVTs, which are marine craft, landing vehicle. I don't know what the T stand for. But anyway, that's a marine vehicle. And anyway, they would put these causeways into the beach so the ship could pull up and either tie up alongside of it or drop its ramp on the end of it and offload cargo that way. When they made my class of the ship, landing craft utility, we could carry 3 main battle tanks or 120 troops fully armed and loaded, and we would hit the beach, drop our stern ramp. Another LCU would come in and drop on what they call a rhino horn, line up, drop their ramp on that, and you would have 4 or 5 LCUs going out to an LST because the water was too shallow for them to get close enough to have troops get off the ship. Our main goal was to land people on the beach dry. There was nothing more aggravating than a soldier or a Marine when he's loaded with salt water, especially if his equipment gets wet. So anyway, that was the primary job. We were cargo carriers. We'd offload bigger ships would be out into the harbor. We could go up and tie up alongside, and they would load us, or we could go right inside the LSDs. There was another class, but I forgot what the name of it is. But anyway, that was our transport. There were landing craft, and there were utility.
Now, can you tell me if you had any opportunity to take a shore leave in Vietnam? What did you do for recreation there? Were there any kind of USO shows?
I never seen Bob Hope. He was on shore, but we were out to sea. Da Nang, we could go ashore. It was a big base. Cam Ranh Bay, we could go ashore. And most of the boats I was on, the minesweepers or the assault craft, were small enough that we could go into the inner harbors. When I was on the LST, we could go in, but we didn't have enough time because we were constantly transporting troops and equipment from Da Nang up to Qua Viet, which is where the DMZ was. And we carried as much beer as we carried ammunition. I mean, you gotta have a drink once in a while. Not us, but because you can't drink on U.S. ships. But we carried a lot of cargo from Da Nang, Chu Lai, which is another little village in Vietnam. We couldn't go ashore in Chu Lai because it was in the Mekong Delta and it was too hostile. And our captain didn't want to take a chance of anybody getting killed or hurt or captured or whatever. So we didn't get no liberty in Chu Lai. But there was, going up the Mekong River, we would make our own liberty. We'd hit the beach with the LST, clear out the area, and then we could have barbecues on shore. We had I was on the minesweep, we had a barbecue on one island, and we didn't know it was a prisoner's island. One end of the island had all kinds of Vietnam prisoners, and the Vietnam Army had control over it. And we just anchored out and let it on a Liberty boat, or with the whale boat, transported our beer and steaks and charcoal, and dug us a pit and had us a picnic. And then a couple of our Vietnamese officers come wandering down the beach, wanted to know what we were doing. They look out to sea, and there's a U.S. Navy ship, big warship, Minesweep, with a little 40-millimeter pom-pom on the bow. And he told us we couldn't stay there, so we packed it up and went back to sea. We had enough time for a couple of beers apiece and a steak, but we were planning on being there 5 hours, and we were only there for about an hour and a half.
I assume you went to Vietnam then after you were in Connecticut?
Oh yeah, I was on,
Right after that.
1957 I left boot camp, went to Great Lakes, and 19 June I think it was, we went to, I was transferred to San Diego, pick up the first minesweep. So from 57 to 61 I was in Nam, and then from 61 to 63 I was in New London, Connecticut. Then I went back, transferred, I was in New London, Connecticut, and I had orders to a KA. Didn't know what a KA was, that was the Mathews. Went to the Mathews and got discharged. I transferred from the Mathews to the leader, it was another minesweep. Then I got discharged. We went to Nam 3 times with the MSO 457, twice with the leader. And like I say, it'd be a 6-month tour, and then we'd come back and then transfer to another ship. And I was always volunteering to go back. Not that I was a hero, but most of I was single and they were married. And one guy, we were on shore patrol together, and he was transferred, he was on the leader, and he was crying one night and whining, and I said, "What's the matter?" We were both second class. And he said, "They got orders to go to Vietnam." I said, "Hey, I just came back, and no big deal." I said, we used to operate with all the navies in the world, Koreans, Japanese. We operated with the Russians, but it was like they were on one side of the river and we were on the other. And that was in the Sea of Japan. Then I went to the New London. I was on the tugboats, and I got on the cargo ship. And I went back, and I was on that 6 months, and then I transferred to LST. And we got out again, and went back, came home, did my 10 days furlough leave, and re-enlisted. And they sent me, they were going to make me a deal. They sent me to a Class C school in Great Lakes, engineman school. That was the only thing they had available. I was already first class. So I wound up teaching the class. The chief said, "You know more about these engines than I do." And it was you had to take a series of engines, and one of them was a 12567, and the other one was a 248. Well, I knew the 248 was a General Motors engine, and 12567 was a General Motors engine. And the E9, by this time they had changed warrants. They had made E8 and E9 instead of going to warrant. And then they still had warrants, but you could go to 2 more steps on as an enlisted man. And the E9 and the warrant officer come dancing down the passageway. "Who's going to the Dixie?" I had finally got a big ship, the USS Dixie, which is a tender. I said, "Me." He said, "You're going to an LST out of Guam." I said, "Oh, well, isn't this nice?" So they had changed my designation, and I took Fairbanks Morse, which helped me when I retired, because I went to work for the state. We got 2 big Fairbanks Morse diesels down in Sheridan Avenue. So when I applied for a state job, took a test, they found out I had the quals for the diesel, so I wound up in the steam plant, which was all right.
Do you have any impressions of Vietnam as far as was the country beautiful?
Oh, the country was beautiful.
Cold, hot?
It was this old sea story. They used to fly me in because I was a refrigeration mechanic too. That was part of the engineman rate. Those of that was in World War II. You had the motor Max, and they took care of the refrigeration, the auxiliary stuff. And then when they did away with the motor Max, they made it a machinist mate. He took care of steam, and the engineman was formed. He took care of the diesels and the auxiliary equipment. So every once in a while, it was Army or Marines would have a base in country, and they used to fly me in with a helicopter and repair their diesel. And one night I got stuck. I was working on it, and it started to get dark, and the helicopter, they tied it down, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "You're going to stay overnight." I was okay. So they used to take Connex boxes, which was cargo boxes, and bury them in the sand when they were setting up the camps. And the Marines or the soldiers, the guys I was with were soldiers, would live in that, and it was in the compound. And fortunately, there was no tax, because they used to get wiped out pretty regular. And this black sergeant was sitting there, and we were eating out of sea rations. I enjoyed sea rations. That was before they got these modern LERPs, or boy, there's a new one now. They just add
MRIs, meals
MRI.
ready to eat.
Yeah, but I used to like that ham and beans. So anyway, and I heard this noise outside, and I went to open up the hatch, and the sergeant grabbed my arm. He said, "You don't want to do that." I said, "Well, there's somebody out there." He said, "If he's out there, he don't belong out there." So I'm thinking somebody putting satchel charges against the thing and everything. So anyway, I went to sleep. Next morning when I get up, when I went outside, the sergeant says, "Come here, I want to show you something." As big as cat tracks I ever seen. I didn't know they had leopards and tigers and panthers in Vietnam. He said every once in a while, he said, "Want to get in on the compound and scratch it, you open up the hatch, you got a 150-pound cat in your Connex box." He said, "We don't want to do that." Anyway, we flew out the next morning, and I went back to my ship. And but that's as close to the harrowing experience. Oh, well, one other time I was going to Bridge Ramp, and I went down to Tenshaw. The ship was at Bridge Ramp, LCU, and I took the truck and I went down to the Bridge Ramp, or down the Tenshaw Ramp, to get our mail. I was on an LST then, and while I was going down the road, somebody threw a rock in the back of my truck, and there was always a danger of somebody hauling a grenade at you. So I pulled into the ditch and rolled out, and I had a 45, and I had a carbine too, but I had the 45 in my hand. When I rolled out of the truck, this sergeant kicked my foot, and I almost blew him away, almost. Because I didn't know what to expect. I was stunned from the truck. And he said, "Are you all right?" And he kicked me at the same time. He said, "Don't shoot." I released it, put it back in my holster. And he said, "We see the kid. We got the kid," but he said he was just throwing rocks at you. I said, "Well, I thought it was a grenade. I wasn't going to get blowed up in the truck with a bunch of mail." You had to make all those excuses. What happened to the guy's mail? But that was another. At that time, convoys would be going down the road, and kids would be sitting by the side. And here again, third or fourth truck in the convoy, the kids would close the wire and blow them up. I never seen them, but they always told us, if ever somebody throws something in your truck, get out of that truck as soon as you can. Of course, I had to explain to the captain why I dented the fender of the truck, but he understood.
What was mail call like? Was it greatly anticipated?
Oh, well, we got pretty good mail because the Navy highlines a lot of stuff when you're out to sea. So if you're on a convoy or you're on a patrol, and I was on market time in gamewarden, you'd pull up alongside another ship. So our mail was pretty regular. I always got at least two letters a week, but I had my mother and my sister to write. So and most of the other guys, never heard of anybody getting. One guy got a dear John, but I wasn't sure. I never seen the letter. But I think he was just using the excuse not to stand his next watch. And we always felt sorry for him, so we let him go sit on a fantail and mope.
And for those
but we worked together.
For those that don't know, what do you mean fantail?
Oh, the back end of the ship. The bow is the front, and the back is the fantail. And the quarterdeck is usually in the middle of the ship. That's where you come on and off. And that's where all the brass hang out. I keep forgetting them.
Was there a ritual that you'd have to go through to get on the ship and go off the ship?
Well, whenever you have to request permission to come aboard and request permission to leave, and you had to salute the flag coming and going. And technically you saluted it whether you were in uniform or not. The Army, they salute with and without their hats. Navy, usually you don't salute if you don't have a hat on. But it's protocol on different services.
From Vietnam, where did you head next?
Well, I come back here to the States again. I went to San Diego. I was at Guam. That was our home port for the assault craft. And the guy come down the pier and he said, "You got your orders." I said, "Great," because I always used to make any ship, any coast. With being single, I was in the Navy to travel. And he said, "You got orders either to Orlando, Florida, or not Orlando, Florida, wherever the boot camp is in Florida."
Sanford?
Could have been, I don't remember, but it was either pushing boots in Florida or going to some place called Poughkeepsie. And I looked at him. I said, "That's Poughkeepsie."
Oh.
He said, "It's a reserves training center about 80 miles down the road here from Albany." So naturally, hey, you got a chance to get duty in your hometown. So I said, "Is it recruiting or," I didn't really want to recruit, although I would have, I was proud of the Navy. He said, "No," he said, "it's a reserve training center." So I said, "Okay." So I went there and I was home. The reserves didn't meet on weekends, and then they met the different days during the week. We had a CB unit down there, and then we had a security unit that was up here in Scotia, New York. And they moved them down. And the CB unit, they moved down from Troy, and they consolidated it in Poughkeepsie. It was the halfway point between New York City. And I was stationed. I made chief there, E7, and I had a lieutenant commander who didn't like funerals, so I wound up being CACO, because it was casualty assistant. Somebody got killed or somebody died while they had military time. They were veterans. We used to do the military funerals, and like I said, that was good duty. Then a hairy experience there was I used to have to go to Earl's Neck, New Jersey to get the ammunition for the, we weren't allowed to have rifles on the station. That was when the flower power people were breaking into the armories. So we used the American Legion and Poughkeepsie rifles, and they were 06s. And I went down to Earl's Neck and I got a 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and didn't think, I just gave him the requisition, some major Marine Corps, he was in a CO down there, or supply officer, whatever. And they put the can in the back of the station wagon, and blank ammunition's no danger, so I had no problem going through the tunnels and that. And I come back here and I stopped off to have a beer after hours at the American Legion, and the sergeant at arms or quartermaster, whatever they call them at the Legion post, he went out and got the thing and took it upstairs. So the next day we had a funeral. So we had he loaded all the rifles and put them in the back of the station wagon. I picked up a couple of reservists. We used to give them a qual for drill. Instead of going to a drill, they go to a funeral, and I covered the drill for the week. And we were down in some cemetery near Bear Mountain. It was in the winter. And we had to go. I had a gunner's mate who was on shore duty with me. He was in charge of the firing squad. And we had a bugler from the local school, and I buried this guy who was in the Army. He was a veteran from World War II. And I had gotten permission from the Washington, instead of playing taps, or firing the rifles and then playing taps, I had them, we're going to play taps first and then fire the rifles. Because people were upset. Especially when they were war guys that get killed in the war, Vietnam, it brought them back to life. We'd present the flag and they'd throw it at us because they were mad. I mean, it wasn't our fault, but it was hysterical. So I told the chief in Washington, I says, if we fire the rifle after we play tax, it brings them back to reality. So we did that. But anyway, I'm standing there in front of this lady and I'm presenting the flag, and it was a World War II veteran. And I hear the ready, aim, fire, 21 gun salute. And I'm looking out into the distance waiting for the last round, and I see these twigs flying. They give us live ammunition. And nobody checked. Even the gunner's mate, because the guns were already loaded. They were bolt action. So I just, I made the presentation to the lady, and I turned around, saluted, and I turned around and I walked over to the gunner's mate and I said, what was all that noise? Because ball ammunition makes a bigger noise than blank. He said, I don't know, but he said, I'm looking on the ground. He said, I'm seeing shells that had misfired because it was World War II ammunition. It's supposed to be ball, and there's 2 shells laying on the ground with the slug in them. And that's what was breaking up it's a good thing they were firing off into the distance. Somewhere there was a shell, because after it's spent, it comes to the earth. And I said, Jesus, I hope nobody get hit. I mean, it wouldn't have killed anybody unless they were right at them, but going off at that angle. So I took the ammunition back to Earl's Neck, New Jersey, needless to say, and this major wouldn't take it. He said, you never got it here. I said, what do you mean I never got it here? Where am I going to get live ammunition? I said, there's the requisition, because I had a copy. And it said right on it, ball ammunition. It was my fault in one respect, because I never looked at the can. Because it said right on it, ball ammunition. So, but it was just weird things that happen if you're responsible. If somebody had got killed, they probably would have put me in jail. But I was fortunate. All we did was kill a couple trees or broke some branches.
The general reaction from people at that time, when you were at Poughkeepsie, when the Vietnam War was going on, what was the reaction? Was there a lot of hostility from people?
Not in Poughkeepsie. The only, when I was flying back from Vietnam, I pulled into San Francisco and Travis Air Base. And when we were going from Travis Air Base to the Navy base, that was when the flower power people were active. And when we pulled into the base, and I seen it in the movies years later, and I said that actually happened. where the guy would be standing in front of a gate with a rifle at parade rest, and they were putting flowers down the barrels of the gun. And they weren't antisocial, but they were killing babies and stuff like that. They run around with signs outside the base, Treasure Island. But the people in Poughkeepsie themselves, they were very sociable. They were interested. They wanted to know what I had seen. Well, most of the guys that were stationed down there were from Vietnam. But the local people in Albany and Poughkeepsie were pretty good.
Was this your last tour with the Navy at Poughkeepsie?
No, I went back to sea after 3 years at Poughkeepsie, and I picked up a World War II gasoline oiler, USS Noxume, AOG. They carry outgas, diesel oil, lubricating oil, and that was my med cruise. And we sailed to the Med, and I went alongside the AS-16, Howard W. Gilmore, submarine tender in La Madalena. And I knew about 10 guys on the ship, so they have a little club. We were going to be there overnight. I had nothing to do with fueling on this particular ship. So we went over and had a couple beers and tell stories and lie, whatever. And I come back, and we had to go what they call the Zumwalt Special. This is an officer that was top in his class for navigation, so they give him instant command. He was Lieutenant Mike MGM. And he had to be the first in everything. So they had to hurry up. Now this is a World War II oiler, so the pumps weren't that good and the valves weren't that good. So we contaminated a couple thousand gallons of lube oil for a submarine tender with diesel oil, because when the pipe comes down the main gallery on the tanker, there's other valves that go to different tanks. So depending on what you're delivering, and somehow or other they had put the lube oil on the forward part of the ship. So when you're sucking this high viscosity oil through these pipes, and it's cold out, because it wasn't snowing in La Madalena, but it was almost freezing, 32 degrees. And the oil was cold, and it was sucking the lube oil through one line, and it was leaching fuel oil from another line, so it was contaminated oil. When they first started out, we were giving them good lube oil. But as we progressed, the ship was supposed to sample the oil when it came aboard, which they did, but they should have been doing it periodically. So once they got the first shot of oil, it was good 30-weight oil, so they said, okay, it was Shell. I'll never forget it. We were sailing down the Mediterranean, all of a sudden, returned to La Madalena. Just a message came on. I was sitting in the chief's quarters, and the radioman came down for the radioman chief and give him the message, and he says, we're going back to La Madalena, and he took off for the captain. Because the captain lived in the front part of the ship, and the enlisted lived in the back part of the ship. So we get back to La Madalena, and we got a four-striper. He made admiral later on, Shelton. And he's jumping up and down on the quarterdeck, and he went pointing to the captain. And my seedy tail as the chief was in the pilot house. So he's telling, I want to see you in my cabin, and he walked off the quarterdeck. So the captain put on his hat, went up, came back, and he turns around to the XO, and he says, we gave him contaminated lube oil. So I said, well, I told it to the XO, I said, well, we'll just put it in one of the tanks. We'll take it to Cartagena and give it to the Spanish. Because you can't separate lube oil and diesel oil. It's no way of purifying it. So we got underway, and when we got to Cartagena, we offloaded the oil. In the meantime, they had a big investigation. So they figured out what happened. And the captain got a letter in his file, which don't go over good. But so we left Cartagena, and we're heading back to Naples, and they mucked the tanks. What mucking means is they take the seawater, flush out the tanks, and dump it over the side. Well, you can't dump fuel, there's still residual fuel. So we have chemicals we put in it that breaks it down. So when it hits the water, it sinks. Technically, you're not supposed to do that. But the captain here, again, like I said, he was in a hurry. So one of our radio men sent out a message, illegal, to all the countries along the route, Algeria, Spain, Italy, and whatever in the northern country, that we're polluting the Mediterranean Ocean. He got transferred. He was second class when he left the ship. He was third class. The captain got another letter of reprimand, and we tied up in Naples. Of course, being an oiler, we were the last buoy out, and it was an experience.
Well, we've only got a few minutes left.
Okay, I could sit here for hours with
Yeah,
stories.
I know. It'd be very easy. It's interesting. So if you want to tell where else you were in the service and what you've done since.
When I left, we come back to the States and they decommissioned Noxume, and everybody got their choice of shore stations, whatever. But because me and the captain didn't get along too well, although he admitted later on that I had been right. And officers don't like to admit that enlisted people are right. And my famous, or claim to fame, I got assigned to the USS Howard W. Gilmore, AS-16, and that's where I retired from.
Okay.
So,
And then what have you done since you
since I
been out?
retired, when I get out of the Navy, I was sitting on the front stoop of the house, and I see all these people going to work, and I'm retired. And I stopped one guy I knew down the road, and I asked him, "Where are you going?" He always said, "I'm going to work." I said, "Well, let me go with you. I'll give you, let's take a ride down. I can take a bus home." And they work in this beautiful marble palace they call the Empire State Plaza. So I said, "Geez, I said, I get a job down here." So I took a state test, and I became an engineer for the state. Almost got beat up a couple times. I was standing outside waiting for the bus. I said, "Oh, isn't this beautiful?" They let us work in this beautiful marble palace and pay us too. And then I retired from the state, and I drive school bus now for entertainment.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks
And
for
this
having me.
interview began at 9:30 in the morning and it ended about 10:30 in the morning.
Well, I hope it was entertaining.